It was a dark era in ancient Greece, several thousand years ago, where gods clashed with titans and mortals bent to their will.
Ares! Destroy my enemies, and my life is yours.
It was also a time when a ruthless and skilled Spartan captain rose to power by spreading terror and brutality throughout the villages of Athens.
Burn this village! Burn it to the ground!
With his lust for victory, and through a devilish pact with the god of war, Ares, he found himself seeking vengeance against the very gods who have given him his unyielding power.
Ares! Athena! You conspire against me! You will pay for this, Zeus. Be certain of that.
Thus was born the story of Kratos. Conceived not in the ancient chronicles of Greek mythology, but in 2004 in a revolutionary game development studio in California. With director David Jaffe at the helm, the team at Santa Monica Studios created what some have deemed one of the greatest games ever made.
It's a great game to allow you just to pick up and unleash your dark side and just go nuts.
Released in 2005, God of War sold millions of copies and garnered numerous awards and heaps of critical acclaim. A legend was spawned, whose story was carried across several epic sequels that have met similar sprawling success. With each installment in the God of War franchise, a new director was summoned to continue the story of Kratos, creating a fresh experience for a well-known and established character. Join us as we meet the unique minds behind the legend and learn how each director developed their respective games and contributed to the mythology of God of War.
Welcome, everyone. We have some Kratos fanboys here, I assume? Nice. God of War revolutionized the gaming industry with its epic storytelling, jaw-dropping action sequences, and a compelling cast of gods and goddesses, not to mention a quick and brutal lesson on Greek mythology. It is something I consider to be one of the most eye-catching and platform-defining franchises out there, and has set the standard for every action game that has tried to follow. Today, we will discover the vision behind the vengeance as we meet the directors of each of the God of War installments. First up, his visionary eye has brought us the destructively satisfying Twisted Metal series, which holds the record for being the longest-running PlayStation-exclusive franchise. But that wasn't enough for this ambitious alum from USC. He went on to direct the very first God of War, thus introducing us to the world's ultimate badass. Please welcome David Jaffe. Next, as animation director of the first God of War, his talented team brought Kratos to life in groundbreaking graphical glory. On God of War 2, he expanded the story of Kratos, deepening the saga and turning it into a legend. Please welcome Cory Barlog. You good there?
I'm all right. Everything's good.
With over 11 years of experience in the entertainment industry, our next director has co-founded Ready at Dawn Studios, which has given us amazing PSP classics such as Daxter and 2 God of War games. For the first time in 2008, God of War went mobile, and gamers were finally able to bring the epic story of Kratos wherever they went. Please welcome the director of God of War Chains of Olympus, Rue Virasoria.
Right on, dude.
As lead environment artist for the first God of War, our next guest helped establish the world that Kratos would inhabit. He stepped up to become the director of one of the greatest and most legendary games ever created for the PlayStation 3. Please welcome Stig Asmussen. And finally, this director began his God of War career with Ready at Dawn Studios, where he was lead level designer for God of War Chains of Olympus. This year, he is tasked with leading the entire team and helming one of the most anticipated games for the PSP. Please welcome Dana Jan. Ladies and gentlemen, the creative directors of the God of War franchise. Okay, so guys, I have to ask, how are you feeling about this? I mean, this evening is all about you guys and these amazing games that you've created. You feeling good?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's tons of excitement coming from your side of the stage.
Can I just say thank you to all you guys for coming out? This is it is a big thank you very much. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So I'm feeling thrilled and honored and grateful.
Yeah. You guys all had a Red Bull before this show. Come on.
Yeah, actually,
I got one right here.
we still have the Muranos.
Actually,
I
I want to
haven't
add
even
too.
finished
I
one.
think it's. I mean, you guys are pretty much a testament to all the work that we do. I mean, the reason why we're here and the reason why we're doing this right now is because of the fans, and you guys make our job worth it. You know, it's fun making great games, but we do it for you guys as much as we do it for ourselves.
Okay, so we should probably break it down brass tacks at the beginning. What exactly does a game director do?
This is an excellent question. We talked about this earlier, but I mean, from my perspective, I mean, a game director actually is kind of like, you know, a captain on a ship. They're basically there to make sure that everybody is doing the right thing and steering the thing in the right direction. And so, from my perspective, you're actually, you know, involved in a little bit of everything. But at the same time, I think that you had an interesting perspective on that too, and so did David, about actually doing nothing.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is like, maybe you do everything, but really you kind of do nothing. And I know Dave doesn't agree with that, but what I mean when I say that is like, when you become a director, you're not rolling up your sleeves and getting down and dirty like the rest of the team members do, and the sweat that they put in is actually propping your ideas. So I think a real general way you can look at it is the game director kind of is this guy that's got this vision, and very early on, he's got to be able to play the game, he or she has to be able to play the game from beginning to end in their head, very early on.
Well, I mean, see
See the game. And they have to illustrate. They have to be able to illustrate that to the rest of the team.
You're right. I mean, everybody. I don't know your background, but I mean, you can animate, you can draw,
Not anymore.
I can't. You know, I can. What?
Not anymore.
But I mean, so yeah. I mean, obviously, the guys who are also in the trenches, who then move into a director role, I imagine would have a different perspective on it. But my perspective, though, is it's when you talk about sort of the vision of the game, especially on the first God of War, when nobody, with the exception of a couple of us, had any idea what it was. Every single day, you are sort of having to deal with the fact that you've got a very talented, incredibly educated, brilliant team that's going, does this guy know what he's doing? And you have to figure out a way to convince them by hook or by crook that you actually do have a vision in your head. And so when you say, well, the director doesn't do anything, I'll tell you what, I mean, it is a great job, and I'm hopeful that Sony allows me to continue to do it for them as long as they appreciate what I can do. But it is a hard motherfucking job. And you guys managed, I don't know about you guys, but you two guys managed to do the job and still be really well liked on the team. You know.
Well, I think you bring up something really interesting about that, though, is that idea of having, you know, the vision of the game in your head and having to actually command a team of people to trust that what you're telling them to do or not to do is the right thing, when whether or not they can see it. And you know, they may have their own idea how something should go, but maybe it doesn't fit into this gigantic puzzle that you know ultimately how it should turn out. Or hopefully you do, and hopefully you take the right criticism and the right, you know, kind of
But let's
questions.
be honest, a lot of the time, we have no clue what we're talking about. I mean, there are a lot of leaps that you make in this job where you're like, all right, look, I kind of know what I want, but sometimes you're discovering as you go.
Yeah, and the thing is that's the hard part. If you don't believe it yourself, or if you don't know it yourself yet, it's making people believe in the idea. That's, I think, one of the hardest things.
Otherwise known as lying.
Yeah, well, that too, but becoming the cheerleader, right?
But
yeah. Even when the morale is down, you got to make people believe that this is the right thing to do. And that's one of the biggest jobs actually as a game director, is always making people believe that this is good, regardless of how bad things feel.
I have to respond to that though, because seriously, as you're right when you're talking about specifics. If it's like, shit, how do the Icarus wings work? I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
But the
Not on the
nugget,
general.
the core heart and soul of that game, I do think you have to know it from the minute you walk in, and that's what you have to protect the whole process through.
So how did you guys become game directors? Because I don't think until recently you could actually go to college to be a game director. What path led you to this career?
There is no, and I guess,
There is no
except for
path.
no, even for you as well. It's
for
just
me, it
sort
was
of
just
a
that Corey
happenstance
quit.
thing. Yeah, I quit, so and he quit, so I got it. So really, all you got to do is find somebody to quit.
Well,
Just quit.
You were saying
Right,
you started
exactly.
in animation and you guys started in drawing. Is that is that eventually what led to it?
No, there was no direct path on that. Me doing animation and me ending up in directing was really, I guess the only reason I got it is because everybody who was good turned it down.
No. Corey and I had a lot of discussions about the storytelling in Max Payne 2. And that was, we were very much about how do we tell stories via interactivity and not through cutscenes. And the minute we started having those conversations, it was like, okay, he gets it. And so it wasn't that everybody else turned us down. It was just
But
that
it was.
It wasn't. It was the fact that those conversations kind of happened after everybody turned us down. If they would have happened earlier, you know.
All right.
I think sometimes you just fall into it. I actually wasn't expecting to direct. It just so happened that the person who was leading the project right there didn't fit in the mix. I believe that the game should be something different than what it was, shaping up to be, and basically said, you know what, I'm going to take the reins. And it's not so much that somebody tells you you're going to be that; it's that you become the person that the team needs. And I think that for all of us, I think it kind of is that, right?
For me, it was actually kind of the opposite. I mean, after Corey left, the team is kind of deliberating and trying to decide like who was going to do it next. And I actually went into my boss's office and I named 2 people, and I wasn't one of the names. And he said, "What about you?" I'm like, "No, I gave you the 2 people I thought it should be." And then he brought me back about a week later, and he's like, "You're going to have to do it." And the thing is, the thing that really sold me is the team was really behind it. He had conducted a lot of internal interviews and everything, and that meant so much to me. And to be honest with you, it was a challenge. And at the time, I questioned a little bit, and now I don't question it at all. It was the greatest decision I ever made. I love it.
And you know what, just to finish on that idea, when I was doing Chains of Olympus, it almost was a natural transition for Dana to do what he did. I actually asked him before we finished Chains of Olympus, as much as, it would have been cool to do a second one, I asked him one day, hey, do you want to direct the second one?
You just said you didn't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Kind of like along those lines.
Pass the buck.
Yeah.
It appears to usually happen in the most weird places.
Yeah.
Like, hey, it's in the kitchen and you're having a bagel.
Yeah,
And someone's like,
exactly.
hey, you want to direct the next game? Yeah, sure, all right.
But I mean, if I
Over
can
drinks usually.
if I can kind of speak to the other end, because to me it's a coveted position. It is a position that I fought for. That frankly, when I started at Sony, there weren't even designers. The idea of going, to my bosses and saying, "Hey, I want to be a designer," it's like, do they have those in video game? I mean, this was back in 16-bit, side-scrolling days. It was like, the artist will do it and the programmer will add some pickups. I mean, that was literally how 95% of the games got made. It's certainly console games. And so first it was fighting to explain we need designers in games. And not every game needs a director, but a game like this, where you are establishing a universe, if you don't have, whether it's a good vision or a bad vision, if you don't have a singular vision that everybody is funneling through, everybody's off making their own pieces. But if you're talking about building a brand new universe and you don't have a core idea that is sort of a singular vision, and ultimately the whole team, not the whole team, but key members of the team begin to add to that, you just end up with a big mishmash, and it usually is a game that gets canceled. So for this game, it was a position that I was proud that we kind of pushed and said, we need this as a position for this game.
Right. So let's talk about how God of War started. How did you even come up for the idea for this brand new universe, as you were saying?
Well, you're a dick. In the best possible way. That even sounds not good. No, seriously. So I had always wanted to do a game that felt like you were going on this big adventure. And so that and my initial love of Greek mythology were sort of the initial, ideas of, hey, let's make a God of War, or let's make a Greek video game. And then there was a sense of, brutality and violence, frankly, is something that a lot of gamers that sort of embrace this genre like. And we were kind of like, well, what if we kind of mix that with Greek mythology, which was very violent and very sexual and very adult, and if you read it. And so that's sort of where it all really began. Everybody already knows it's a team effort. Everybody knows that Jaffe didn't do God of War 1 by himself. But until Corey came on, and brought the animation to Kratos. It was like I could show everybody videos of Russell Crowe and Romper Stomper till the fucking cows come home. But I did. I said, you see how he's slamming this guy's head into the bar? But until Corey came on and was able to actually take that and express it through animation, he was kind of a dead character. And Corey is as much as, if not more, the father of Kratos than I am.
Oh, Dave.
It's true.
He actually explained what the character was. Oh, sorry, but he said it was Martin Riggs and Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
That was the example you gave. First day on the job, he's like, hey, Greek mythology. He's Martin Riggs and he's Russell Crowe. Go.
I remember the one sheet that we turned into Sony that said sort of what if, it actually said what if Paul Verhoeven, which nobody knew, so I changed it to Ridley Scott, but what if Ridley Scott directed Clash of the Titans? And it was the idea of basically taking that kind of very adult sensibility and applying it to Greek mythology. And so there were a lot of stories that, we originally had Kratos mimicking the Perseus' mother story where he was put in a box and thrown into the ocean and covered with chains, and that's where his chains originally came from because it crashed on the rocks and Ares was attacking the seaside village. And it was everything kind of technology and animation, and Charlie Wynn, who was the concept artist who really kind of gave birth to this character visually, everything fed into everything else. And my favorite story about that just really shows how incestuous it is that Charlie was doing, I went to him and I said, do a version of Kratos like Ed Norton from American History X when he was the Nazi. Right? Because he was just so, he's a Nazi, but in terms of his physique, that scene where he curb stomps that guy and he's like, ah, and it's like, holy shit, he's badass, And so he kind of did, it didn't look like Ed Norton, but it had that vibe. And the way Charlie draws, and I don't know if most artists do this, but I'd never encountered this, where he drew it, but the skin was all white. And it wasn't that it was white, it was like a primer or something. And I mistook that for, oh, you gave him white skin, that's awesome. He's like, no, I got to color him in. And I said, oh, no, don't do that. This is genius. And from that, I remember it was me and Charlie and one other guy, I forget who it was, standing there. And we said, well, we got to come up with a reason why he has this skin now. And that gave birth to the story of, hey, he kills his family and he gets cursed and that's the ashes of his dead family. So everything on a game, because it's not like a movie where you have a screenplay and then you make it. You're making the game well before you know all the elements of the story. Everything kind of fed into each other until the very end, and it's like, oh, I guess we have a complete product. I'll be quiet now. You guys should say something.
Now, okay, so Kratos is this, bloodthirsty character with no real moral compass beyond personal vengeance, really. Yet we all root for him. Why do you think that is?
I think it goes to the core of what you were talking about also. He's the alpha male, but at the same time, the whole Martin Riggs thing with Russell Crowe really rings true. It's just that it's the kind of guy that you don't want him to be all good or all bad. You want him to straddle the line. And that's the thing, that's what makes him so great, is that he straddles that line between you don't really agree, but you're fine doing that because ultimately you know the end goal is right. And it's the making of every great hero in every story, I think. If you look at the history of humanity, if you look at the greatest stories out there, it's always about that guy who straddles the line.
He's also the underdog.
I was going to say the same thing.
And that's, everybody loves a good underdog story, and he's not he's not the one that you normally think of it, but for me, that was the biggest thing.
Well, he's an underdog, but he's like the ultimate underdog.
Right.
He's this human, going up against gods and creatures of mythic proportions. So it's the underdog times like 100.
It's the underdog that you believe could take down a Titan.
But to me, personally, I relate to him, and it's not about the moral stuff. It's about what Dave was talking about really early, was that if you could if something frustrates you or you're angry about something, you need to conquer something. If you can do it in a fashion that's just epic and over the top like Kratos can, who wouldn't be compelled to play a game about a character who has these same challenges and faults and flaws as everybody else has, but when he wants to do something about it, it's ripping the heads off a Hydra or something like that. That's awesome. So.
And it's interesting about Kratos is that while he may be maybe not an anti-hero, but fairly myopic in his view of having vengeance, he kind of inadvertently changes the world around him for the better in almost every situation. Sure, he may have a huge body count and a bunch of blood following him, but he's bringing down a fairly corrupt system of gods. In the end, he actually gives mankind free will. So I think his actions, while from a different perspective on his own desires, actually help the world, which I don't know if everybody sees it that way, but.
With the success of the first God of War, what was the reasoning behind getting a different director for every installment? Did you just become too expensive?
I wish. Wow. I mean, I left Sony because, you know, for me, it was a sense of, I was looking at what these games were making, and I was just like, you know, and I was seeing friends selling companies and making a lot of money, and I don't know if I'll ever have the ability to do that, but it was me kind of going, you know what, I want to strike out and kind of try to make great games and make a crap ton of money, and that's just honest. I was just like, you know what, there's a lot of money in this industry. Maybe I'll never get any of it, but it would be kind of cool if I could, and so that was why I left, and you stepped in.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of the same. For me, I liked going into work with the people I liked going into work with. So seeing a lot of those people leave, and Eric Williams was a guy I'd worked with for like the last 15 years. He was the main combat guy on God of War 1 and God of War 2. He was striking out to be a consultant, and Shannon had left as well. Phil Harrison, and that was a really big blow to me. I'm just kidding about that. So I kind of realized, like, you know what, staring down the barrel of a long 3-year crunch on that game with not some of the people, excluding some of the people I really enjoyed working with, kind of, it didn't appeal to me anymore. And other opportunities, you know, getting to work with George Miller, I was pretty much not going to pass that up. So it wasn't any sort of indicator of like, hey, you know what, we got to have a different director. It was a good spin. It's a great spin to say, hey, we have a different director. That was the whole process from the beginning, is we wanted somebody different. But the reality is maybe our own egos got in the way. So we all wanted to move on and do bigger, better things, calling all cars.
Yeah, I mean, for me, nice job there. But as far as, you know, moving on, I think it's not so much that I didn't like doing what I did or anything like that, but we started the company, me and a couple of other friends. And at the time that God of War was finishing, I think the company as a whole needed me more than the game did. And I was juggling business with making a game, which is always a bad idea because you'd end up by arguing with yourself constantly, because creative ideas don't necessarily make good business ideas. And when I talked to Dan, it was mainly that. It was just, you know what, at least for the time being, I need my focus on strengthening the company. And I couldn't do both and be sane. But you know what, that said, we have 5 directors, 5 games. I think that's the reason why the games work that well.
I was just going to ask, why do you think having so many different directors is beneficial to the franchise?
We all have our different takes. We might not agree with everything that we would do, you know, in each of the games, but that was the beauty of it, right? It's like the franchise wouldn't be what it is if not for the fact that we all brought a little bit of ourselves into the game we're making.
So then let me ask you this. As the franchise has progressed, how have each of you changed the character of Kratos? How do you think his arc has grown over the games?
I'd actually say his arc it kind of goes all over the place, I think. You know, he has that consistent desire, I think, that was sort of instated in the first game of, I want to die. I did this horrible thing and I'll never forgive myself for it. And it sort of returns a little bit to that. But I mean, I think maybe it's a little bit to our detriment, perhaps. We haven't evolved his arc to change him as a person. I mean, he still kind of just shouts at the gods and says Ares and Athena a lot, which is great. He's an ornery character, but there are layers beneath that I think we could have explored. I know for myself, I feel like there was a lot of balls I dropped. That didn't sound right, did it?
No, he didn't.
I dropped the ball several times from a story perspective on that game, because I tried maybe to go a little bit wider. I wanted to really have Kratos' impact be felt throughout all of the world, throughout all of that Grecian world. So maybe a little bit too much of the overreaching aspect and not personalizing his story. That's, I think, is an exciting aspect about Ghost of Sparta, is that it really gets down to Kratos' heart, more of a personal story, rather than maybe the overreaching grand epic that I was trying to go for. You know,
I think that is really a really good point. Like when we started working on that story.
That I screwed up? That
no,
was a good
no,
point?
not that you're dropping
Thank
balls.
you for that.
You know,
I dropped balls.
yeah, keep those balls up.
Right.
But no.
Okay.
That, you know, when we first started talking about
I can't say anything worse than you've already said.
No, but that when we first started talking story on Ghost of Sparta, I mean, it's this huge story with this huge arc that, you know, one of the decisions made early on was to focus on a smaller aspect of it, right? It's like we kind of know the big picture, but let's hone in on a part of his backstory that'll connect this game to the other ones, and let's really tell it in fairly great detail so that you can get, you know, you can get a lot out of it, and you kind of feel like, oh wow, we didn't just kind of gloss over that. That was kind of an important thing, and it really does tell me a little bit about why he's so pissed off. And so I think that was actually a cool choice. Maybe you dropped some balls, but I think you picked them up.
Thank you.
We're going back to that?
Yeah, we're going back. We're done with that though.
Right.
We get the reason behind the rage. So what did each of you learn from Kratos along his journey?
I can tell you exactly. God of War is about a guy who, God of War 1, is about a guy who puts everything aside for his ambition for work. And he loses his wife, and he loses his kid. And, that's all I need to say about that, so.
I don't even want to follow up with anything now.
I don't mean to be sad.
You couldn't have waited till last to
It's
see what
it's about putting your work ahead of your spirit. I mean, that's what that's what it was about for me.
So I guess killing people solves problems is not really going to go over so well.
No.
You're the one who went grander and bigger. It totally can be.
Right, yeah. No, I did learn something from Kratos, actually.
Tell me.
What you want, you should just take it. It seems really basic and really simple, but quite honestly, Kratos gets everything he wants, save for the fact that he doesn't get those horrible memories of killing his family out of his head, which was a great little whoop, pull the football away. But I really do believe there is a lot to be learned from that. Of what, if you want something, be damned the consequences. Be damned this sort of pessimistic thinking that you could talk yourself out of it, and just do it. Because if you don't do it, you won't do it.
Now
it's time for deep thoughts.
It's very true, though.
No, it's
very true.
And Dana, we haven't seen your game yet, but
Yeah, well, soon enough.
yeah.
But no, I mean, I think from a character standpoint, I think super insightful what David just said about the whole idea of Kratos basically forsaking the things that really matter in his life for his job. It's like war, making these games. These games are really, really hard. So who you have in the trenches with you really matters. And it's a really strong group of individuals that work together as a team to make these games. But we're all sacrificing stuff. We're all making choices every day, to make these games as epic as they are, so you guys will enjoy them. But there's a cost to all of them. So
Remember when you get your $5 off at GameStop for the used copy. I'm kidding.
The God of War series saw Kratos traversing worlds not often seen in video games. Let's take a look at his epic journey.